Good afternoon, Tracy Angwin. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Darren.
It's so lovely to have you here. You know, Tracy, you and I go back to, I think it was 2012, which is 8 years ago. We met doing an entrepreneurial business program, and we've been buddies ever since.
We absolutely have. And I think that was one of the great outcomes of that course.
It's a good outcome of that course. We met really good people, and we've been able to establish long-term relationships as a result. And you know, I've watched your business evolve. Your business, if I'm correct, started in around 2010.
Did.
You've got over 1,000 members now. It's phenomenal. Tell me what it's like being the founder and managing director of the Australian Payroll Association.
Well, it's a little hands off these days, to be honest. I've got a really, really good team. So I guess it's matured to a point where I don't have to be there day to day. I'm working from home today, although I know in Victoria you've got no choice, but we do.
No choice at all. And you have a choice, and you're still working from home.
Correct. Yeah,
Go figure.
I've got no makeup on. I'm wearing a t-shirt. I mean, if you'd have told me this 12 months ago, I would have said you would have had rocks in your head that I would have let someone record me looking like this. But I think the world's changed. And look, I mean, I think for me the big thing, Darren, is a team, and that's what's changed. Sort of changes you from being a business owner to an entrepreneur, if you like.
Yep. And tell me about the team. What have you created? What are the components that you felt are really important?
Someone said to me once that he looked for PLUs, which is not very good from diversity and inclusion point of view, but he meant people like us. And
right.
what he meant was people who think like us. So we attract people who think like us. So I look for people who are, not afraid of changing the status quo. They're really curious. They question things. They don't just always do what we've always done because that's how we've always done it.
Yeah, because we've done it in the past. That's the way our ancestors did it. So we'll just keep doing it that way.
Exactly. So people who have that creativity about them. And you don't think of creativity in payroll being I
would have.
Bedfellows.
Put the two words together. Payroll, creativity. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, well, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But, we're just always looking at the ways we can do things differently. And, years ago, in fact, when we first started in 2010, we were doing online learning. And to be honest, it was because it was cheaper than hiring a hotel and going and doing face-to-face learning. So we've been set up for delivering really high quality online learning for 10 years. So the whole, other than, not really being able to go freely to, a lot of things this year, in your normal life, in terms of business, it hasn't really changed all that much for us.
Right. So tell me, what a typical client, why would they come and seek your services?
Well, they either need support. So we've got 5 sort of major revenue lines. The first is membership. You sort of talked about that earlier. So we've got a number of members and we support the payroll function. So whether you are, our largest are Coles, Woolworths and the Department of Defence. And our smallest are local bookkeepers who might be doing the payroll on behalf of some small business clients. So, and everything in between. Our typical client has sort of more than a couple of hundred employees though. So they would need support because there's something like 60 different acts of parliament in Australia that we need to be across, or at least to have some sort of awareness of, in order to run a compliant payroll.
Jeez.
So
how do you do that? How do you stay on top of 6?
Well, you can't.
No.
So that's why you need people like us. So when there are things, so when something like Victoria changes the way that long service leave is paid, rather than going and have to figure all that yourself, you just call us, or we proactively provide that information to members. Then we've got training. We've got lots of different types of training. We've got on-site training, so bespoke on-site training where we might go out to a client who's got 10 or 20 people in their payroll team and we'll do bespoke training for them. We have online learning, and as I said, we have been doing that for 10 years, and now we're doing what we call virtual classroom training, which is a bit like what we're doing here now. You'd have a slide deck and a presenter, and we still cap the numbers as if they were in a classroom.
Yes,
you're getting a really interactive experience.
And
we've got like an electronic whiteboard, so when we flick it over to an electronic whiteboard, you can see it's just like writing on a screen. We do consulting. So I spent some years, a few years ago, working with one of the big 4 accounting firms to help them set up their payroll consulting business.
Nice.
And And we also do some consulting as well. And to be honest, don't tell them. It's probably an area that I think there's most opportunity for growth in right now.
Why is that? Why do you think that's the case?
Well, payroll's pretty much, I mean, it was only COVID that took payroll off the front page of the page in the Sydney Morning Herald. And we're seeing it back again. Just in the last few weeks, we're seeing, the regulators getting pretty interested in payroll compliance again. So we've seen some, it was sort of retail and hospitality got really smashed last year. Right now we're seeing not-for-profits, and we're doing a lot of work with not-for-profits. So we provide consulting services to go and make sure that their payroll is compliant and sort of optimise the payroll function. Because it's got to be compliant, but it's also got to be efficient. Because you don't want to pay any more for the payroll function than you have to. What else do we do? Darren, we do recruitment, specialist recruitment for payroll people, and we do something else. Qualifications, of course.
Okay.
Cert 4 at diploma level payroll qualifications.
Right. So was there a qualification in payroll before you guys joined the industry, or? There
wasn't. So we expect all our colleagues to be qualified, don't we? Our IT colleagues, our accountant, we hope's got a qualification. Sure. Our HR team, we hope that they've got a qualification. Yep. But for some reason, payroll, where you're potentially managing the largest cost and certainly you could argue the largest asset in most organisations. For some reason, we didn't expect the people that manage that function to be qualified. So there's now, I think we're 7 years into it. You can get a Cert 4 in payroll administration, which is your functional payroll training, or a diploma of payroll management, which is a sort of a more managerial style diploma.
What was the trigger for the industry to start wanting to, or yourself starting to want to accredit their operators, their people?
Well,
was there a catalyst? Was it an event?
No, it wasn't an event, but it was just, for me, I wanted to professionalise the payroll function. I wanted people in payroll to accept that it was a profession, and they were sort of treated like, it was like accounts payable. And there's so much more to it. There's so many decisions that have to happen. There's so much knowledge that you need to have to run a payroll. So it just seemed that, Blind Freddie could see that the industry needed a qualification. ASQA, the regulator, weren't going to do it. In fact, we had to fight tooth and nail to actually get them to agree to let us do it. And now it's actually a pretty popular program.
Why wouldn't they have wanted it?
Because
it seems to us like it's a straightforward thing. It should have happened. Why are they hesitating?
Well, the reason is that no one understands payroll that's not in it. I mean, you understand it because I've been nagging at you about it for 8 years.
Yeah, correct.
But most people don't. So what happened is we had to get industry support. One of the things you've got to do when you build a payroll, build a qualification is get industry support. And we had 40 letters from employers, large employers. Think, big manufacturing companies, big retailers, hospitality and healthcare industry, large employers, and all supporting a qualification. And yet the regulator said to me, can't they just do HR? Can't they just do a bookkeeping?
Really?
The Cert 4 and bookkeeping should sort them out. And really, it's a completely different function.
It is, and I don't think they recognise that difference in function or the expertise to get it right.
Yeah, they certainly didn't.
Yeah.
And they probably do now. But it was certainly, that was the biggest sort of barrier to get that done. And you just had to be a bit pig-headed to get it done. And to be honest, naive as well, because knowing what I know, I probably wouldn't do it again. But
That's
it was
interesting.
Much, much more difficult than I thought it was going to be.
Why was it difficult?
It's just highly regulated.
Right.
And, government departments and regulators don't work as fast as entrepreneurs do.
Yeah, correct.
And it was also a lot of money. I had no idea what it was going to cost me.
Yeah.
I remember at the time thinking you could have bought a small house in Sydney for what I personally invested in it. So
wow. I mean, that's a significant commitment.
It was a significant piece of work, yeah.
Incredible.
But I'm really glad I've done it, and I'm glad I did the two together, because I probably wouldn't have gone back and done the diploma.
Yeah. From an outsider's perspective, and I think you've got training and qualifications. Mm-hmm. How come we read on the front page of the paper, here in Victoria specifically, we read about, George Columbaris, the MasterChef judge who had restaurants galore and had really big infrastructure. Actually, he had that nationally. Why do we read stories that it's all gone to pieces because they've just not paid their staff what they should pay them? If people are qualified, I don't get the disconnect.
Well, a couple of things. One is that only 10% of people are qualified. So even 7 years later,
Wow.
It's a big industry. And so we've only actually been able to qualify. Our benchmarking report, the 2019 benchmarking report, reports 10.2% of people surveyed had a payroll qualification. So we've still got 90% that don't. Specifically on George Columbaris, I actually feel really sorry for George Columbaris. I think he was woefully dealt with. I think comparatively to other underpayment issues, it didn't come out in the press until 2 years after he'd actually paid the fine. He'd paid a fine, and he didn't pay a fine. He realised the issue, and he back paid his staff straight away. Yep. And it wasn't until 2 years later that it came out in the press when Fair Work eventually gave him the contrition payment that he had to pay.
Yeah.
Now that was only $200,000, which is not a huge amount for such a large employer, but the press was so bad, the PR was so bad that people just stopped turning up to his restaurants. And obviously he's got a sort of business that relies on people turning up every day.
Yeah, and he was the face of that business, of those businesses.
And it was terrible timing, of course, as well, because it was the end of his career on the MasterChef program.
Yeah, and the worlds collided at the same time. Look, Tracys, my pleasure, my joy, my focus is accountability. Tell me, in your opinion, is what happened here to that group of restaurants, was that due to a lack of accountability?
Look, I think certainly a lack of oversight.
Yes.
What we find happens in not just that situation, but all of the underpayment issues that we've been involved with working with, and we weren't involved with the Columbaris team, but a lot of them that you see in the paper we are. Yep. The problem is there's this whole set and forget mentality.
Yes.
Or set and neglect, we're actually calling it in the office. We set up payroll technology and just set it up once and just assume that it continues to work.
Press the button and it just runs.
Right. Correct, which is fine if things never changed and if it was set up correctly in the first place. And
you said you had 60 acts of parliament that must change on a regular basis, different government, different attitudes.
And the modern awards, there's 122 modern awards, and they change regularly. So what happens is what we're getting, and in terms of accountability, what we're finding is that payroll teams are typically processing the pay fine, but they're not actually checking the outputs. And that's what we should be accountable for, is the outputs, not just assuming that the product is going to, the button's going to be pressed and it'll be all okay. Right.
So can you explain that? When you say outputs, what am I meaning? My pay slip?
What we're actually paying and how we're paying it. So for example, I'm just trying to think of a good example. We may find overpayments as well, Darren, that's in 70% of the work we do, we find overpayments.
Right. So it's not always about people wanting to, and I guess as a community, we just go straight to the negative thing. The press jumps onto it. It's done because someone wants to rip somebody off.
Correct. And talking about overpayments doesn't sell newspapers. So, and and the journalists love the ripping off line. And look, there's no one that I've worked with that hasn't had an almighty shock when we've found underpayments, and that shocked and horrified. The ones that there's probably only one I can think of in the sort of well-known businesses, which is the 7-Eleven case, which I think was deliberate fraud. Yep. And there's lots of small business who do try and take advantage of their workers. But in the ones that you read about in the paper, I can assure you that I'd be pretty sure that none of those had been trying to do the wrong thing. Yep. But what was you asked how it happened? No.
Yeah. Well, what I was talking about was that you've got 122 awards, 60 acts. That must be a lot to do self. I'm thinking you and I came from the old IT background. Mm-hmm. You're pumping updates into a server to deliver. You must be delivering updates every second of every day when you're talking of 300 things that change.
Yeah. Well, the first thing you got to do is know how to get the updates, because not all the updates apply to you.
Yes.
So if I'm a retailer, I'm probably only interested in the retail award and the warehouse and distribution award and maybe the transport award.
Yeah.
I'm not interested when the dental award changes. That doesn't affect me. But you've got to be proactive in actually finding out how to make sure that you know when those things change.
Yep.
But then there's more state-based legislation, like the long service leave legislation I talked about earlier. That's a good example. And Victoria, a couple of years ago, had a massive change to that.
Yes.
You guys do like to make life difficult down there.
I don't understand. I mean, why can't we all work off the same set of rules? It's one country. We're an island, right? So no one's, we're on our own. Why can't we all be on our own together?
Why can't you? I don't know.
I don't get it.
Look, long service leave is an outdated style of leave anyway. It was actually the reason it came in is because back in the when the large migration came to Australia, sort of in the 50s, lot of people from Europe. The idea was once you'd been at an employer for 10 years, you'd get 2 months off to travel back to Europe to visit your family.
Yes.
Now we can get on, and that used to take 6 weeks.
Yes.
Now we can just get on a plane, more outside of COVID times, and be in Europe in 24 hours.
Yeah.
So it is quite an outdated idea. I mean, most of the long service leave acts were written in the 50s.
Yeah, I didn't realise that it was about you being able to have the time to go back on the boat, back to homeland and catch up with the rallies and then come back again.
Exactly right.
Unbelievable.
So yeah, it's and the other one that's state-based is payroll tax.
Yes.
But again, what's the chance of getting 8 state and territory governments to agree on, on much? Now, there was some work done on harmonising payroll tax, but still, states use it as a way to get investment into their states. Come and put your call centre in South Australia because we're going to, reduce our rate of payroll tax, for example. So the chances of getting everyone on the same page with these state-based taxes and leave is somewhere between 0. Buckley's and none.
Yeah. Know exactly where that is. Hey, you've seen a lot of, you've read a lot of newspapers, you've seen the front pages, and you know that in some cases, you know the truth behind it, why something made it to the front page. Mm-hmm. Tell me, what do you understand the term accountability to mean?
Oh, look, it's probably more so in my team than my clients. I sort of think about accountability, but certainly from a client point of view, I believe there's scope to have more accountability, but we actually, I think it's all very well. You can sort of throw the accountability term around.
That A word.
Yeah, the A word. Yep. You've got to have some sort of infrastructure or planning or system or to hold people accountable, because it shouldn't be a negative thing. Shouldn't be something that we see as in a negative context.
And it's interesting you raise that, because as an accountability coach, I find that people's first impression is I'm the punishment.
Yeah, right.
For someone that made a promise to their team members, and it didn't deliver on it.
Yeah, and you're going to shame them publicly somehow.
Correct. And you're a naughty boy, and you're a naughty girl. You are going to see Darren in the corner, and he is going to sort you out. I mean,
couldn't be further from the truth, really. You're just a teddy bear.
Correct. He's a teddy bear, of course. But the thing is that most people see it as a negative. Mm-hmm. They don't see that actually accountability is a positive, really, what's the word? A positive or encompassing event that if you do it right, you're bringing a whole lot of people along for a ride.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not just on one person.
I was going to wear a different T-shirt that has your name on it. You said, wasn't quite sure who was going to see this, so I better not wear that.
Very kind of you.
But it goes to that, right? Getting stuff done.
It is getting shit done, and we all need more of that in our lives and our businesses. Mm-hmm. How have you found, as a leader of a very entrepreneurial business, but also as the CEO of Australian Payroll, that you've got many members that see you as the leader? Mm-hmm. How do you hold yourself to account?
I just think for me, it's everything I do needs to be defendable. Which is, I think about that quite a lot, because I'm not averse to being controversial, and I'm quite happy to call out things publicly. But I always need to make sure, my worst fear is to call something out and be wrong. That is my worst fear. So I just make sure that when I do something, particularly if I do it publicly, it's completely defendable, and I've got the evidence to back it up. Yeah,
because you're in a situation where people are looking at you for guidance, they're looking at you for leadership. Mm-hmm. And you need to deliver on that. That's interesting. How do you think you look at, and you mentioned about building your team, how do you make your team members accountable? How do you hold them to account?
Well, First of all, I just employ really good people, just good people, not even, I mean, I have absolutely the best skilled people, but they're actually just really good people and they want to do what they want to do. People like you. They're people like me. We just don't have turnover. No one leaves. And, you know, I mean, we've just been lucky at finding the right people. We are at a point, though, where the team is getting a little bit big to just have this sort of laissez-faire kind of management structure.
Yes.
So we are implementing some processes and systems that does work with accountability. And in fact, it's even got, instead of an organization chart, it's actually got an accountability chart. And it will actually talk to what the things that each role is accountable for, rather than, you know, KPIs or things like that. It's like what you're actually accountable for. And people love that.
It's interesting. And I think there's a big misunderstanding that I've certainly found being in the coalface, that people, accountability and responsibility are like cousins, but they're not the same. See, we're accountable to people. We're responsible for things.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. And people get that around the wrong way. And all of a sudden they're trying to hold themselves to account for a particular task. And that's not how it works. You're responsible for doing that task and getting it right, but making sure you actually get the task done and completed is a person-to-person interaction.
Yeah, right. And personal responsibility really goes hand in hand with accountability, I think.
Yeah. So how do you get your team, when you're working with your team together and you're doing perhaps a planning day, you have those.
I've got one on next week, in fact.
Half your luck. We're in Melbourne. We're doing planning days by ourselves in the comfort of our own home. Yeah, it is. It's a bit like
Shouldn't laugh.
You got me thinking. Well, you know, you see me wearing the business attire from top, you know, from my chest up.
You're just like a newsreader, aren't you? You've got your board shorts on.
Got the board shorts on and the thongs.
Exactly.
Got to feel like I'm at the beach even if I can't be. But we're talking about your team and planning and being able to get everybody working together as a team, individual components that all bring different skills and expertise. Even though they're all people like you, they're not exactly the same as you. You bring them all together as one and you work together as a team to achieve a common goal. I mean, that's the description of teamwork.
Essentially, yeah.
Exactly. How do you get your team to then focus on what's important? What's one area that's a bigger priority than another? How would you do that?
So again, it's this sort of system of, you can't solve all the problems at once. Like if we try to, like I've got a list as long as your arm of all the things that we need to do.
Yeah.
There is no way we can do all of them, certainly not at the same time. So the rule is we only ever work on the top three. Now that might be the top three for me, might be the top three for the business, might be the top three for each individual.
So how do you work out the top three?
Well, you just have to choose them. What has the most impact?
Incredible.
So again, people are responsible for their own top three, knowing what the overarching goals are.
Right. So every individual has the top three things they're working on.
And that could change week to week because one thing it could be I've got to do something by Friday. Now I've done it. Now I choose my next thing.
Yeah, exactly. And the goals, are they short term and sort of medium term and long term, or
some of them? So some of them might be I've got to deliver a consulting report to a client. Now that's going to take 6 weeks.
Yeah,
some of them have to be. I've just told someone yesterday, in fact, that we're building a new product, and I need him to get it up on the website for Monday when our newsletter goes out because we want to start selling it. He's got 2 days.
Wow. Okay. It's now on his top
priority.
three.
Exactly.
Yeah,
it's on his top three.
Correct. And so once you've identified the priority and you set a path towards achieving that goal, do you have team members working with each other to ensure they're held to account?
We don't so much, only because if you weren't someone that was able to manage your own accountability, you probably wouldn't be in the team.
Yeah.
And most people are a bit like me in that they're their own worst enemies in terms of that they're your accountability coach. But that's because we've got a small team. Yeah. If we had a bigger team, I think we'd need, and we are getting to the point where we're having more structure, because I think, as I say, if I'm just working with you and there's a couple of us and we're interacting all the time. It's easy to keep each other accountable.
Yep.
If we're at 5 different locations, where people in and out of the office,
everything's coming and going all the time. Nothing remains the same.
Exactly. And so if you haven't got that sort of close-knit, team on a day-to-day basis, certainly if you're working from home, I think you do need some help to to work with accountability, and either it's a system or a coach like yourself, or some peer-to-peer accountability.
Peer-to-peer works
however it works.
Yep. Hey, Trace, I thank you for your time today. I really appreciate that. I want to ask you one more question before we finish up, and that is, if you were to rewind the clock and go back to the time you left uni, you left your tertiary education, and you looked at yourself in the mirror and said, I'm going to go out there and this is what I'm going to do. What would the one piece of advice that you'd say to yourself looking back that you'd need to do more of? What's the thing that's worked for you?
Crikey. It's really hard because I've probably got a list of things. But
it's top 3, as you said.
Top 3.
Pick the one.
I think the thing for me is being curious about how you can make a difference, like genuinely make a difference. Like, for example, when if I start a new business, or I'm looking for I'm building a new product, I'm not just copying what everyone else has done. It might well be 90% the same, but what makes it unique, what makes it different, what makes it basically what helps me be able to sell it.
Exactly.
What is the customer actually looking for? Because, there's the whole thing with if Henry Ford would have asked his customers what he wanted, they would have said faster horses, right? So we just need to incremental change for me is what I think do well. And so I think being curious and ask and being totally open for feedback is the key to do that.
And the other interesting thing that I've noticed with you is that you just give it a go.
I do. Look, honestly, I thought you were going to ask me about my ideas and things. 4 out of 5 of my ideas are terrible. They never see the light of day.
But you know what? Keep creating those ideas.
Oh yeah, I have multiple ideas.
And so
drives my team nuts.
We're supposed to finish, but that's an interesting. Thank you for throwing me that. Tell me, who makes the decision of those 4 or 5? Who makes those decisions to go ahead with those 4 or 5 ideas?
Oh no, they
don't go ahead with them.
The market.
The market. So you've got an idea, you take it out to the market.
Yeah, I've got an idea. I'll get a what do you call it? You're the marketing guy, like what is it called?
A little feeder
the
group.
Prototype or whatever, and I'll try and sell it. If it doesn't sell, I'll figure out why and throw it away. Yeah, we do fail fast. And, we're not a technology company, but I really love failing fast.
Yeah, it's good though, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
I hate losing money on trying something and then flogging a dead horse.
Oh, wow. Look, if everybody had the same level of enthusiasm, the same level of resilience that you have, I mean, you've created a wonderful business. And Tracy, thank you so much for sharing your secrets with me today.
It's always a pleasure.
Great to catch up.